Bullying, trolling, posting unflattering photos and videos online, the internet is a haven for people who want to put down others these days. The victims of these negative comments and pictures often don't know who's doing it or why, and that just amplifies the bad feelings. We've also seen how some posters shame their victims for being overweight, disabled, from a different culure or religion. These kinds of messages get around, and pretty soon it seems like everyone knows. How do you deal with shame to come out stronger and more confident? Our guests have some stories and suggestions. First, though, it's helpful to understand just what shame is.
It's often defined as a powerful and painful emotion caused by a strong sense of embarrassment, disgrace, guilt. So it can overlap with other emotions.
That's Dr. Frank Farley, professor of educational psychology at Temple University in Philadelphia.
You can have feelings of failure that might overlap a little bit, might underlie some of the effects of shame. We're often concerned about in our lives of success and failure, and the sense that we might be failing or unimportant or dumb, etc., can be really very negative and powerful emotions. So shame puts together a lot of very negative emotions that sort of impact our self-concept, our self-esteem.
Farley says that these days bullying and shaming are so pervasive that they can result in severe mental and physical consequences.
It can have tremendous impact on people's self-esteem, their sense of self-worth, their happiness, obviously. It may lead to depression, anxiety. As a subcategory of bullying, we know that bullying can really have terrible consequences for kids. It's been associated with suicide in several cases. The downside of shaming is extensive and negative.
Liz Briers' parents understood the power that shame could have over her life, even in the days before Facebook, Twitter, and email. Brier was a teenager from an affluent Chicago suburb who became pregnant in 1979 when she was still in high school. She writes about her life in an out-of-state facility for unwed mothers in her book, Look at You Now, My Journey from Shame to Strength.
I personally didn't know anybody who'd gotten pregnant, or certainly hadn't heard of it. And I do think that my community was not exemplary of all the communities in the country, but certainly for the 5%, this was not acceptable. My parents were convinced that if people found out that I got pregnant as a senior in high school, that my life would be ruined. So they had been recently divorced. I found out I was pregnant when I was 4 months along. There was no alternative but to have the child. I agreed it would be a good idea to give the baby up for adoption and give that little baby to a family who couldn't have one. It was obviously not something that was socially acceptable.
Brier says that her parents thought they were sending her to live in a very different facility than she ended up in.
They told me I would be going to a Catholic home for unwed mothers, and I would live there in hiding. They would tell the community and the family that I was sick and living at the Mayo Clinic. And then when I would get back, I would graduate from high school and go on to college. So when I arrived at this Catholic home for unwed mothers, I learned it was not a Catholic home. It was a government-run facility for wayward, underprivileged, delinquent teenage girls who were pregnant. Most of them on leave from juvie hall or the foster care program or the streets.
Brier says that the whole experience in the facility was an eye-opener and transformed her preconceived ideas of what it was like in less affluent and more troubled worlds than her own.
They were survivors, these girls, and it really fundamentally changed the way I sat in the world and then ultimately saw people. I mean, I think the notion that these girls were open to me, first of all. They knew I was a rich girl coming in and hiding my last name. It's an amazing juxtaposition to walk in terrified and feel you're not going to be able to survive, and then a few weeks later realize you're one of the luckiest people in the world.
When Brier returned to her high school to graduate, just a few days after giving birth, She was met with suspicious glances, whispers, and even boos as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma.
What was really interesting was 5 months earlier, I literally was fighting for my life. I was nervous I was going to be beaten up or hurt. And so coming back to my privileged neighborhood and having people sneer or boo felt like absolutely nothing in comparison to the world I had just lived. In other words, I grew up very quickly in a 6-month period of time, and we all are just who we are. I mean, in my heart, I see sort of carrying the burden of an untold secret as very lonely and slightly fraudulent, because people don't know why you are who you are, and you want them to know because you feel so different. That's the sad part. But the good part was that going through all of this by myself and having to reckon inside of my own self at such a young age, I think it really built up the inner strength muscle, like massively.
Farley says that sometimes feeling shame or being shamed can make a person stronger and send their life in a more positive direction if it's done with the right intentions.
Sometimes shaming could be positive. So, for example, if somebody does something really nasty and you point it out and you highlight it to them, that can perhaps, in a sense, you're shaming them, but maybe that'll have a positive impact in that the person won't do that again. But shaming is mostly negative, but sometimes the original motive for the shaming might be positive. Often parents will say to their child, "For shame." And so you've just been corrected for something that you have done that was bad or negative. So that can be a positive side of shaming.
More often, though, Farley says that kids who shame or bully don't have the best intentions, and it can be devastating for a child, especially if it's done over social media. He has some suggestions for parents whose child might be in this situation.
Always talk it through. Don't run away from it. Don't skip over it. Sit down and have a full and open discussion. Anything goes. Even if it maybe had to do with sexting in some way that was an attempt to shame the child. Therefore, it needs full airing by the parents and the child. And in my view, always the best approach is sort of to be rational, to be reasonable, to sort of dissect it and show what the motives were for it, and that you are absolutely not deserving of this, and emphasize the child's strong points, and point out the nature of people who do that. They're sort of nasty qualities, they're bullying, sort of aggressive qualities. You might want to emphasize things like they probably have nothing else to do but this.
He adds that nipping it in the bud is also a good idea because people can develop what's called complex post-traumatic stress disorder that can affect kids into adulthood.
Complex PTSD is where there are many traumas over time, and they may be smaller traumas, but they sort of, we believe, add up. And if you've been shamed more than once, perhaps several times, or bullied several times, perhaps there may be an accumulation effect of that. And you may begin to perhaps literally develop a disorder.
For more about Liz Briers' journey from frightened pregnant teen to confident wife, mother, and author, her book, Look at You Now, is available now. For more information about all of our guests, visit our site at viewpointsonline.net. You can find us on Twitter at ViewpointsRadio. I'm Gary Price.
Been looking for the perfect holiday gift for that coffee or latte lover in your life? Make it a special one with the Keurig K-Latte single-serve coffee and latte maker available exclusively at Walmart for only $99. The new Keurig K Latte single-serve coffee and latte maker allows coffee lovers to enjoy regular single-serve coffee or lattes in the comfort of their own home. Use any K-Cup pod to brew coffee or make delicious lattes. While most specialty coffee makers can be complicated, time-consuming, and messy, the Keurig K Latte Coffee House Brewer is simple to use, allowing consumers to prepare coffee or lattes in minutes. Swing by your local Walmart or find the K Latte Coffee House Brewer at walmart.com for the everyday low price of $99 and give the gift of a more delicious holiday.
Each day, 11 million kids and teens leave school with no place to go, increasing their risk of being unsupervised, unguided, and unsafe. But for more than 4 million youth, Boys and Girls Clubs provides a safe haven after school with caring mentors and quality enrichment programs. In fact, 54% of Boys and Girls Club alumni say the club saved their life. To celebrate club alumni and friends, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, through a partnership with Keurig Dr. Pepper, has launched a digital yearbook with club alum Shaquille O'Neal.
Growing up in the projects of Newark, New Jersey, temptations like gangs and drugs were dangerous. But going to my local Boys and Girls Club every day helped me fulfill my dream. That's why I love the new Alumni and Friends Yearbook. The online platform brings fellow club kids and supporters together to share stories and make new connections with alumni across the country.
For more info on Boys and Girls Clubs of America and to sign the Alumni and Friends Yearbook, visit bgca.org/yearbook.
When buying the perfect gift for everyone in your list, it's easy to hurt your credit score by maxing out credit cards or not paying them on time. In fact, 57% of people say holiday shopping is a financial strain, according to a new study. But Experian Consumer Education Manager Sandra Bernardo says you can take steps to avoid the credit score naughty list.
Be aware of what does and doesn't get factored into a credit score. Making credit card and loan payments on time is crucial. This alone makes up about a third of a score. Having a healthy credit history rather than always using cash also helps. A common misconception is that rent, utility, and phone payments are factored into credit scores, but the truth is they're not. So it's important to wisely manage credit card use and pay loans on time.
So this season, Experian cautions not to get caught up in the holiday shopping frenzy. Check your credit score, set a shopping budget, make payments on time, and don't rack up too much credit card debt. Get tips at Experian.com/education.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of Media Tracks Communications. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook to learn about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on iTunes. Plus, you'll always find podcasts of our segments and information about our guests at viewpointsonline.net. Join us again next week for your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.